Hello, my name is Alex Hobcraft. I am the founder of AWH Marketing, and you're listening to the DiscoPosse Podcast.
Look at that. So this is a funny irony that you and I did the first DiscoPosse podcast.
2009 or 2000?
Yeah, like they're a few years apart, and it was like I really think it was before its time in what we were doing. The irony was that today I do what we wanted to do, not quite in the length of form, but the idea of like casual, conversational. I think we recorded one, and it's still out there in the world somewhere. And it's like, if you look up DiscoPosse Podcast, there's two, and I have this old one sitting there. And it was probably like 2.5 hours that we just kind of like.
It was long. We went deep into music, like deep.
Yeah. Which, of course, the guitars in the background, for folks that are watching instead of listening, it'll be rather obvious why we dove into guitars.
Yeah.
But before we jump into the fact that I miss you, my friend, and it's been a long time, and we've had a lot of exciting stuff happen.
Yeah.
If you want to introduce yourself to all the folks that would be new to you.
Yeah. So I started a business in 2009. It was a music school. It was very subtle, humble music school. We started with 13 students because I'd lost my job at the end of the economic crash of 2008. So I had 13 students, and over the next 3 or 4 years, I think we grew to around 200. And, I learned all my marketing through doing stuff. And like I wrote the other day on LinkedIn, you made my first website, which was amazing. It was a slider website, which was now commonplace, but now it's back then it was hard to do a slider. So it was good. It was a wicked website. And I just started a marketing journey back then. And then around 2016 or 17, we did another podcast about my journey moving to Hamilton. We were from Toronto, but you lost the audio on it or something.
Yeah, we had a recording flub. We had bandwidth problems, and then it stopped recording at one point, and I was like, oh. It was like it was telling us, just wait, your time will come. And
like, a lot of people don't realize like what's now commonplace was really hard to do even that long ago, like how much things have changed and how much it's changed marketing and how you can look at things, and like doing the podcast with a microphone and no video to now just logging in.
Yeah, that's right.
Like remarkable. So I grew that, and then we opened a school in Hamilton. So we had the two locations going. Timing was terrible because it was 2019. We were on par to grow like we did in Toronto, and then 2020 happened, and I don't want to talk about anything else because
yes,
about COVID.
The years that don't exist.
Yeah, exactly.
they're like Voldemort.
So and then during COVID, though, I worked with Digital Main Street, which is a nonprofit, Ontario nonprofit, they would go out to Toronto. I worked in the Toronto location, but they're all over Ontario. And I went and helped small businesses with their digital marketing. So a lot of small businesses out there still have a really hard time with it. I think they find it challenging. There's a lot of information to know. And for me, it's always been interesting. It's always been almost like a hobby, like music. And I've fallen asleep to YouTube, shows and audio books and reading books. And so I helped out hundreds of businesses and say half a dozen different industries. And then I worked for OBIA, which is the Ontario Business Improvement Area. I switched over part-time because running the school, running your own business and then working full-time was getting challenging, and the 16, 17-hour days were starting to take a bit of a toll. So I had to totally slow down, and then I worked for OBIA. But now all of that's gone, unfortunately, because the Ontario government has ceased funding to help small businesses. And it was crushing. Like the amount of feedback that I got from all the businesses that I helped, they're like, "What? It's just stopping?" Because we helped a lot of businesses. So I decided to go out on my own, and that's where we are kind of today. And so using LinkedIn and trying to help businesses in Hamilton, um, I think my expertise works a little bit better for brick and mortar type businesses, but I've helped lots of different industries. So yeah, that's pretty much where we are now.
Well, that's the thread I want to pull on right away is the concept of like digital marketing versus hyperlocal marketing, which is a really tricky merger of practices because doing, brick and mortar style, I call it hyperlocal because you obviously have a bit of a catchment area on what it is. You may have a product that goes beyond, but ultimately the goal is proximity audience. So how did you find the tools that you were using or the tools that are out there and the information that's out there in how it doesn't work for a true, SMB local marketing, even though the content is the same, the tools are the same, but the practices and the targeting methods are fundamentally different?
So, I mean, it depends on your industry. And this is something that I had a real problem with is that a lot of marketing is just, sent out there. It's a one size fit all. And I noticed that in Toronto and Hamilton, you think that they would be the same type of customer, and they're not. So that's one thing that's a lot different. In Hamilton, there are huge amounts of suburbs where people will travel to your location. In Toronto, not so much because it's so congested now. If you're in a big, massive city, I used to have people who would call me from the annex. We were at Yonge and Eglinton. Now, as the crow flies, yeah, it would probably be a 15-minute drive. But as the Toronto winters and construction and just how poorly I think traffic is handled in there, you're looking at a 45-minute, and then you add snow, you add anything else, and I would have parents just missing lessons. And so I never wanted to advertise to the people who were there. I wanted to advertise to people who were core 5 block radius of where our studio was. And that's hyper local. And the thing is that back then, nothing did that. Google Ads, you couldn't. Now you can do it by postal code. But back there, you had to think of other ways because no one would allow me to. And everyone, I would get advice from marketers. It's like, just advertise to everyone in Toronto. And I'm like, no, you're not listening. Like, I have a very specific business. And I just said this to someone the other day. If I tell someone to come to my studio and they have a hard time getting there, you have this weird gray area where it's not that they don't like you and it's not that they don't want to be with you. It's just not working with their situation. And so it's still a negative kind of thought of your studio. And I had one woman, she called me and I found out where she was living. I'm like, you're too far away. And I said, this is a good studio for you. And funnily enough, she then referred someone who did live close to me. So sometimes giving the best advice to who your customer is the best way to do things. And instead of trying to get everyone to come in, I always thought of the long game. And I think it really helped because our retention was 70% for music studios. A lot of music studio owners don't believe that I have that kind of retention. And um, and they stay for like 2 years. That's my average life cycle of my client. And that's because I just thought locally. Like I advertised in the local schools. I didn't do any print advertising because that takes a lot of commitment. Although I did try it in Hamilton and it failed. It was not successful. So I would just do. I would get in front of where my client was, and my client was a mom who works and is married and earns a certain amount of income in Toronto. It was family income was like 1.8 million. They lived in a home. They spent their summers at the cottage. Like I knew everything about my customer because my kids were going to school, and B, I just looked at everything from their perspective. So that was a long-winded answer to your question of how to go hyper local. I find sometimes you've got to do what works for your industry and not listen to the experts of of many of whom give you misinformation, in my opinion.
And also, there's a neat thing that you discovered that I would happen upon later on in the industry too, which is the difference between the consumer of the service and the buyer of the service. So on the marketing side, we talk about, in the nerd world of where I live and market, it is the champion. So we call them the technical champion. And so we call them the TDM, the technical decision maker.
Right.
And then the BDM, or the business decision maker, which is, we also call them the EB, the economic buyer. So I'm selling to the SVP of a platform division, but the person who has to care a lot about our product because they use it day to day is way further down the org chart. So looking at how you market this whole, your students are children, but your economic buyer is very different in what they are, how they're marketed to. So what did you put in place in, sort of learning that process, and how did you find things both, hard and hard way and by reference from other folks of like, this is how, marketing is not quite what you think it is. It doesn't just mean like telling this kid, tell your mom that you got to come back next Thursday.
Yeah, that is a great question, because that was something that was a bit of a struggle at first. And if you remember, a lot of websites were, I looked at all their competition, and they would have things like backwards letters to make it like kids. And it was like they were focusing their things to kids. And we took a different approach. We're like, no, these are adults, well-educated, university graduate adults who are smart. Let's not treat them like idiots, and let's not treat them like we're baby coddling. There's a professionalism that's here, right? Now, we didn't go as hardcore as maybe the Royal Conservatory, which is, a different kind of market of what I wanted. We didn't want the Royal Conservatory student per se. We wanted someone who would love music for the rest of their life, and it would be a part of their life, whether they went to their grade 8 RCM or whether they just wanted to jam with friends. That was our focus. But our messaging was to the parents. It's like, what were you going to get? Well, you're going to get kids who are confident. You're going to get kids who, are going to excel a little bit better in school. I played that angle for a little bit, but I always spoke to the parents. But really, it was just how I always worked on just any friction to get started. And that was the one angle that I took for a long time, because I didn't want people to, waste their time and wonder if it was the right choice. And that's what a lot of consumers do now, right? They look at a number of websites and they choose which one's going to be best. And many times you can come up and all the websites look exactly the same, and you don't really know what to do. So that was with that, and then that in conjunction with, we would donate a lot to schools. That was another track, and a lot of music schools in the neighborhood or solo teachers, they would give a lesson or 4 lessons, and I noticed that we would just get put into a basket with other activities in the area. So one year I was like, I'm going to give 20 lessons, and it really worked, because they were like, wow, 20 lessons, that's so generous. It was like a $600 value. Now, it doesn't cost me $600. I just pay the teacher, right? So my cost is way lower, but the gift, if you will, or the gesture was so welcomed by the parents because it's the Parents Association that's doing all of the fundraising. So I'm speaking directly to them. And 9 times out of 10, what would happen is the person would take their lessons, then they would continue. So I'd make back the cost of the donation, and then they would bring siblings, and then they'd recommend people, and it was like, and then I would be called in September. It's like, hey, can you do your donation again? We really like having you here. So I use those 2 avenues to grow, mostly. So still kind of hyper local, because I would reach out to the schools, and not every school was cooperative. There was one school that was like, I'll just send your stuff out in a email newsletter. We used to give postcards that would go home with the kids. Um, simple way of doing that. Um, those are the things I really did focus on. Who is my buyer? I did the whole persona thing. You know, it's funny because this is how nerdy I get because I love this stuff. I looked at all of our. I think this was probably about year 5 that we were, and I looked at everyone who had taken lessons with us, and I was like, "What's the top male name and the top female name?" And Ben was the number one male name. Funny enough, that's the name of your son. And Sophie, or a variation, Sophia, was the girl's name. So that I used as my avatar for parents. Ben has X amount of kids, and he's like this, and Sophie's has this, and I really used it to strategize as much as I can, as much as I could. But then a lot of people don't remember or forget that your service has to be amazing. And I
Right. Somewhere along the way, you got to actually deliver. There's an execution angle that we forget about.
exactly, and that itself is marketing. And you should be looking at your service or product. I just do services, so I don't know products, but you should be looking at that experience is positive. And and I would interview parents, and a lot of feedback was just like I would give, say $50 off discount. And one parent was like, $50 isn't a lot. We're not here because of the money. We're here because you make this as easy and as fun as possible. So my marketing is also who I hired. We hired a specific type of teacher that had a specific type of personality, that would we found PhD students did not fit our profile. They were mostly a little bit stuffier. No offense to any PhD students out there, but our
Yeah.
experience was that they were very, very pedantic and very, old school in the way that they taught, and um, we hired people who were laid back and fun, but still wanted results. There's there's a babysitting element that we didn't want, which can happen. Um, so yeah, we had a pretty great success rate, and we used to do things like bring our kids to the interview, and if the interviewee didn't look at our child, we wouldn't hire them, because if you're not going to engage with a kid and you're teaching kids.
Yeah. If you're like, what's that thing over there? You're like, that's called a student. Yeah. Oh.
I remember one interviewee, she like literally pulled back and like made a hideous face when we brought our son there, and we're just like, okay, you're not for us. So
That is wild. So a thing that jumped out, it was funny that even in your distribution, I guess, and the way that you're going to market, you highlighted a third piece of the puzzle. So you've obviously got direct marketing where you're targeting, you've got inbound, so you've got outbound, which is you reaching out. You've got inbound, which is you built the website, you're pulling people in so they can find you, and used all the SEO wasn't even a thing back then. So, SEO was just, we did SEO by accident because we were writing and it just so happened that it worked out.
exactly, yeah.
But the school is what we would call channel or like partner angle. So that effectively you're using a third party provider who offers a service to the same cohort that you're trying to reach, but by engaging with them and then pairing with them, they get the advantage of the value of your service and the happiness of their cohort, representation of a client.
Yeah.
And then you also get an advancement in your network size because you can meet one principal, one music teacher, and all of a sudden you have 120 new prospects that year. And it's such an untapped piece of the market that people don't understand, even in hyperlocal, even other things. Like, so I say this, like I've got a coffee company, which, I only quiesced because I just ran out of cycles to maintain it. Even though it was low lift, it was more than zero. And so I had to put it aside. But what I did was I had it for fun. But I'm like, let me just see if this works. And then what happened by accident was I accidentally discovered a market where that I was sponsoring podcasts. And then those podcasts, the people that listen to podcasts are likely to be coffee drinkers. Like there happened to be a cohort representation that there was this persona, right? And this is lookalikes. Like, so if I look back on all the stuff that you and I have done by accident over the years, I'll say it's by accident with purpose. Like we were experimenting, but not realizing, because there was no reference guide. There was no like, how do you do this? We're like, literally we hand painted the logo in the thing, in the lobby, right? Like stuff like that, where it's like little things that no one will notice, but it makes all the difference in the world. And that's the thing with most of the marketing and most of the stuff is people don't realize that the thing that gets remembered is wrapped in 98% of the work that no one will know or understand.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. It's not observed. It's just, of course that's there, right? They're not looking for things, but when things are not there, they're so glaring. If you have a staff member who is always late, that's glaring. When they're on time, it's just, that's what it's supposed to be. And you're right. It's funny you say that, because I was just talking about that to someone the other day. And the partnerships were good, and they were hard. Like sometimes you'd get a principal who didn't care and didn't want to do anything with you or give more than you wanted to. But I still wanted to be a part of the community. It was about it's more than just, I wanted sales. I wanted to be part of the community. Music was important to me. As you know, you and I have played music for many, many years. And, it came at a time, like music at a time in my life that I was so anxious and so low, and it was the only thing that saved me. And that's what I wanted to give people. That was the driving force of why I chose that particular business. I've gone off on a little tangent here, but
but this is the funny thing, is that, again, why I raised this is that SEO became SEO, but it used to be called blog writing,
right?
And good web copy. Marketing and hyperlocal marketing is now no one thinks about it. You just say the term and it makes sense. Cloud computing, all of this stuff, which is no longer new. It's just like, it's just almost expected behavior. But when these things were first developed, like that's just the idea that understanding how to market to parents, not to kids, understanding the difference between those personas, naming the personas. Again, it seems like a small thing, but every marketing team I work with now, they already have it, or I've helped them to do it. And we have like Network Nancy and CIO Kathy, and we give them names, and we give them like, what are they likely to do? What do they enjoy? What are their hobbies? Like we want to understand the person. And the reason is because we don't just want a sale, as you said. Yeah. We want to be an involved, active participant in their success and their outcomes.
Right.
Which is, I sort of joked about this idea of everybody wants to be the trusted advisor. No one trusts somebody who says they're a trusted advisor. It's like if someone says, I have a lot of empathy. No, you see that the problem is that I'm the one that tells you that. You can't tell me that you're empathetic. Yeah. In fact, it's actually reversing. It's actually the opposite. You're only self-aggrandizing by saying it. It's kind of bizarre. So the stuff that, again, is like, you didn't realize that what you were doing was actually profound fundamentals of a successful practice, that now that you can go back and look over where the wins were and stuff, like, how it weighs against costs, and that the partner marketing thing is a real challenge. I help a ton of our clients do this, where like I tell them, like, you can find 20 new partners, and they'll be your services partners. They'll take the meeting. They'll take the donuts. They'll be happy. They'll do the big thing. You'll do the press release. You'll do a blog. You'll do all this stuff. And then nothing will ever happen, because the moment you walk out of that situation, you're not their full-time job. Their full-time job is their clients and their experience and tons of other things. So it's really hard to become important to them so that they can believe that you're important for their clients. And that's why going to market as inbound, outbound, and channel are three completely different cadences.
Mhm.
They behaved completely differently. They require different personalities for people that manage the account experience. It's like hard lessons. I'm glad we learned it, but I didn't realize at the time what we were doing, and that it would 20 years later, I'd be going like, oh yeah, no, this totally makes sense. Like I could go back to literally the days of helping you doing stuff and learning from you and how you were being successful with the school, and taking that to like, I was working in tech, and I was helping financial advisors. I'm like, you should try this. And just testing that stuff out and constantly testing, and not realizing that this passion for what we were doing would become like why I care so hard about doing it now, and why I can do it for 16 hours a day sometimes, and not completely dread going back in the next day to do it.
Yeah. I mean, in the last time we spoke, I did go through a really hard time. I went through like crazy burnout about year 8 of our business, to the point that if I heard "Let It Go" one more time, I was going to kill someone, because I was constantly playing. I had to be in the car, not with no music at all. And I really resented music, because sometimes you can allow things to go against your values of what it is. And I think that part of the success was I was there as a helper, and I was there to serve. And like there were competitors who chose to take a different tack, and there's this temptation to copy them because they were being successful, and you're just like, oh, that's successful. But I didn't want to be about making someone a star. I wanted to make someone just a musician to play, and it was different types of marketing. So I would get a little drowned in the marketing. This is probably in the mid 2010s, like 2015, 2016. It started to become harder because so much of marketing that we had done was becoming expected, but also it kind of started to become almost spammy. In like, people would regurgitate the same things, but I don't think they actually lived it. And that was something like we lived through a lot of changes. Like SEO perplexes me right now, because to me it should just be, you should just give the best service to whoever. And in my last presentation that I just did, I talk about SEO and and how technical it is, and how I understand how the small business owner can just feel overwhelmed with that stuff, because you have to have your meta tags, you have to have your, you know, your proper keyword research done, and how do you write that so it doesn't sound like robotic, and then you have AI coming in. Like, you have all these things. I can see how people are overwhelmed, and I remember feeling completely overwhelmed, and then just trying to refocus and like, okay, what are my values? What is it that why am I doing this, and what is it? And so that's where, yeah, again, I love going on tangents. There's another tangent for you. So,
Well, I think it really does tell the story of how do you make creativity a business,
yeah,
and
that's a good question.
not lose the creativity, but while mapping it against business practice. It's really tough. Like I literally write every day. Every day I write.
Yeah.
We pulled off, we acquired a new client sort of out of the blue, and they're like, hey, super cool. Love what you're doing. I need help with an ebook. I'm like, awesome. Big fan of ebooks. We can pull this off. I'm like, no problem. You know, how long does it usually take? I'm like, well, it depends. Generally anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks, depending on how far along you are, what the design side is, whatever. And they're like, oh, okay, we need it in 4 weeks. I'm like, awesome. Yeah. Let's talk about what the content is.
Right.
It was in my wheelhouse. It was right in my backyard. I'm like, I could literally write this. I could start right now in the meeting, and I could probably be done the first 5 pages by the time we're finished.
Yeah.
So I knew I could nail it, and I could get that experience thing. But it's so funny that I could never market that thing. But once I reached engagement with them and I understand what the problem was, and then we had this real internal challenge of like, okay, now as a business, if I deliver this, it's risky. Because what I've done is I've told them it takes 12 weeks to do something,
Right.
and I'm going to pull it off in 4. I actually did it in 3 because it took us a week to go through negotiations for PO process.
Right.
Also, something they don't tell you about when you're like, hey, you know, I want to just do this really fun creative thing, and everybody's like, oh, this is awesome, I can't wait to do it. And then the lawyers and the accountants get involved, and then it's a whole scene. So I had this combinatorial problem of like, do I applaud the fact that we delivered this unreal delivery and then have to like pull them back from the ledge going, that was abnormal.
Mm.
But I thought, like, how do I do it while also celebrating that we were so bloody excited that we could do this, and they were so supportive of us in the process that they trusted us to move fast and to cut down the review cycles, and they jumped through hoops, and it was a neat sort of dodge, thrust, parry, you know, sort of back and forth that we had of like, okay, I'm done our part, but I need this back in 48 hours, 24 hours to be like, okay, we're done.
Yeah.
And like, awesome. We were all just like working so hard towards this goal. But then when it came back to we were complete, they said, okay, well, given that you're way ahead of schedule, let's really plan out the next piece. And so they kind of slowed back to the traditional schedule. But at the same time, it was like we could exercise that creative muscle, understand the business outcome that we were generating, and then really show how much we could interact with them as a true, like, involved, active, like, we want to act as your employee. I should care as much about the outcome. And that's part of the problem with agency, is that in general, you don't have skin in the game. The only skin in the game you have is your invoice.
Yeah.
So if it goes badly, you just don't get the next invoice. Boo-hoo.
Yeah.
But the person that you had a negative experience with, that could be their prospects and their clients that had a problem. And now they're going to suffer much larger than you will, because you get to just sort of say, hey, not my circus, not my monkeys.
Yeah. No, I mean, and you probably learned a better way to do what you do by having that crunch time in a short amount of thing. It probably changed. Oh, hey, this is how we should do. Maybe we should systematize this in a better way, in a more efficient way. And sometimes those challenges are what's amazing, even though going through it can be painful. But really, you need to go through a little bit of pain to grow. And so yeah, that's interesting that you were able to achieve that in such a short amount of time, because that's one of the things with creativity is you find it hard to what's possible. Like, what can we do? And a lot of people look at industry standards of what you're doing, and everyone's doing it the same way. But I got this from my dad. He always looked at things from you know, a critical angle. Like, why is this like this? And I've always questioned. And I've always wanted to take shortcuts, but not shortcuts to avoid work, but shortcuts to make the work better for me. And like you learned in delivering for that client, you can figure out some shortcuts. And I always wanted to do that, because when you're one person, right? Because I ran it. Rachel and I ran the business, but I did all of the marketing stuff. And you're one person, right? Just straight out of the email, you can only go so far with being one person. And it just comes back to, as you said, caring for your customer. I just also have a really weird memory, which really helped for me. And this is something that a lot of people don't realize as well, as sometimes people have a superpower that nobody else has. I had a great memory. I could remember, this is when we had probably 130 students, 140 students. I could remember everyone's schedule. I could remember when Ben could not come, and I could remember what days worked for them. So when they emailed me and said, what works, I'd be like, on the top of my head, oh, this would work. Or if I saw them in person, or I used to joke that the playground was my office, because I would literally have parents come up handing me money to pay for lessons, or coming to cancel a lesson. It's like, oh, I needed to talk to you about the recital. So I used to joke about that, but I could have my whole business in my head. until we got to about 200 students. And then I started to lose that uh, skill. And that's one thing that I just wish I could bottle and package and sell.
Well, and so that's the next issue is scaling.
Yeah.
Right. And part of why, when you talked about before, like I like to be lazy in the best way. Exactly. Lazy in that I want to eliminate unnecessary steps, yeah, but not to eliminate quality, yeah, right? I want to be able to get to the creative stuff. And, like I said, just, it would be like saying that every time you want to play guitar, you have to restring your guitar and do a neck setup.
Right.
No one would do it, yeah, right?
Yeah.
So how do we optimize when that stuff occurs? Even just tuning. Some people, it's like, it's 3 minutes that they don't want to spend, being especially early on. And when you're going through new experiences, especially in those cases where you've got new people, and this is the same as you going to a new client who has no clients, and you're getting them to ground zero. Like, you're just getting them to open the doors. So they have no prior experience. They have no prior expectations other than, I need to make this work.
Yeah.
And so for you to come in creatively, give them ideas, execute those ideas, but then measure the results differently than they do. So they obviously have a direct measurement, but you have to like narrow what are the actual KPIs that matter. And this is why, all the time when people say like, what kind of stats do you get on your podcast? And like, I can tell you that I had 50,000 downloads last month.
Yeah.
And they like, so what does that translate into conversions? I said, approximately zero, somewhere between 0 and 50,000. Yeah. But it's probably closer to 0. And like, there's no way to actually track that. So the vanity metric could be really easy. I tell people like, I had 1 million downloads and 55,000 downloads last month. It's hilarious because it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't change. What did affect it, though, is I just talked to somebody a few hours ago, and he says he was going for an investment round for his company, and they said, hey, we heard you on the podcast, and we were very interested in how you described this thing. So not only did they, so it was like they listened, and they actually listened hard. They cared about that. So the irony was that I was just doing what we do, which is like finding interesting things about a person,
yeah,
for myself, that I happen to have a cohort representation of an audience, yeah, that has now enjoyed it. But then to get that anecdotal information, like no Podbean stats will tell me that actually worked. But when you hear those, it's like, oh, okay, this is actually inspiring. And it does tell me, okay, this is maybe a thread I should pull for future.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, wow, you talked on so many things that I could just.
Yeah, sorry, I went in a lot of directions on that one.
The first thing is the music. Okay, so, I mean, I've always played music for myself. And as you know, I'm pretty technical on the instrument because I needed to solve the instrument. When you look at music and you learn music, though, you can learn the notes. And there's lots of people who can learn the notes and make music, okay? But then there are people who understand the notes. And it's not that their music's better, it's just that their music has a strategy. And I always use the notes are the tactics, and the scales and the chords and all of that stuff and the breaking of the rules becomes part of your strategy. And that has always been how I've looked at business. And it's amazing how many businesses don't have strategy. They just have a series of tactics. And you talked about vanity metrics. I've always said, and this was before the 1,000 True Fans by the guy whose name escapes me. But it's like I would rather have 200 devoted parents who are constantly talking about me than 10,000 people who don't even come and use my service. Like I remember when we opened our Facebook and a guy from India gave us 3 out of 5 stars, and I'm like, thank you very much for the review. One day we would love to give you a lesson.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, Facebook took it off because I complained about it. But it's like anyone can like something, and they're looking for just their like. But back to your story is like you can't gauge sometimes. I mean, I know that everyone calls it branding, but it's 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 just your personality on your thing, and not everything has to get an ROI. And I used to chase the ROI all the time. That was just always trying to chase the ROI. But sometimes there's goodwill. And I find that that doesn't get talked about a lot in business. Just doing goodwill and and those are the businesses that I truly want to work with. People who want to help instead of just take. So I think,
Well, and what ends up happening is when you combine those things, which again is like it's execution. It's like I can sell. It's easy to get people to try it, but it's not easy to get them to keep trying and to keep riding through that stuff. And especially in a creative element where you and I work, is that it's very nuanced. You could have, I've had it so many times where I was on a call, we had two co-founders and then two, founding engineers, and 4 stories about what the company does came out of that call. Yep. And so what I do is I take them and I aggregate the results and create a sort of combined voice. But even when I go to them as a group and say, hey, here's a video that I did, 3 will be like, awesome. 1's going to be like, nope. Yeah. And 1 will be like, meh. But maybe they don't care. Maybe they don't watch videos. I do video training. I hate video training. I've never watched video training in my life. It's brutal because I just like to find out exactly what I need right now and I'm out. And video is not easy to do that kind of searching with. And so it was ironic that I did long form and yet I never consume it.
If I have to watch something, I'm double speed for everything video because I got to get through it. So yeah, sorry to interrupt, but yeah, no,
that's what's painful when you go to listen to somebody. Like I listened to like a Sam Harris podcast on a regular speed, and it sounded like like I was ill. I was like, I kept checking. I'm like, did I go like -1? Like, how is this guy talking so slow?
You bring up a very interesting point because I find. Just from my observation, I find people do writing on their website incorrectly. I'm not a proponent of doing things in paragraphs, and I think that you should be writing more like highlighting important things. Because like I've recorded people in Hotjar who go to my website, nobody's reading everything. They're
right. Yeah.
They're scrolling up and down. They're going back and forth. And I've watched them for 20 minutes, watching what's happening. And nobody will go like this through your website,
Yeah. Incrementally cranking through an article.
Yeah. Nobody does that. I think that needs to change into highlight unless you're doing like a specific SEO keyword piece. That's just, trying to rank, which I don't think is a good, white hat thing, but I know that you have to kind of do that in this day and age for SEO. But it's just interesting how I think that how you present your things and giving your information in the best possible way so that it's guiding your customer. I think a lot of people just want sale, but it's just like, no, if you invest time into your customer and sometimes, I know people don't agree with this, but sometimes your perfect customer is a reflection of who you are. And so if you are an impatient person and you know that you have people who have a lot of responsibilities, we move really fast. Well, why not try to deliver the information to them in that way? And that reminds me of how I used to do pricing. Really, no one did pricing the way that I did. Most people in kids' activities, they do things by season. So there'll be a fall, a winter, and a spring season and a summer season. And I was like, that's stupid because you give the opportunity for someone to stop. So I used to do 6-month terms because a school year is 40 weeks. So I would go September to January, which seems weird, but it covered my costs over December. Whereas other people were struggling because they would stop their lessons in December. They would lose that client for January.
Right, because they're going to go away for holidays, they go skiing, and it's like, oh, shoot, we forgot, we didn't sign up for lessons. Oh, well, we'll do it in the summer.
Yeah. So I would give people the option. I would give people the option to go monthly, or they could pay for a term at a little discounted rate. Like anything else, you buy anything in volume, you get a little bit of discounted rate. And it really, really worked. And then for some reason, I started listening to a lot of other music school owners who were diehard, you should do things monthly. And I switched it over, and I regret it to this day because it made sense. I had 80% of my clients paying me up front, which was amazing because I had a bigger chunk of money up front, which allowed me to do better marketing because I actually had capital to now work through year and cover spots. And it gave clients something that they wanted to do. So sometimes, like something as simple as just your pricing and changing how people look at it can make your business better. And I never had a lull period until the summertime when everyone would go away, and so those are definitely ways that you can serve your customer in a very, again, it's not going to be something that you could truly track, but you could start to see a pickup in engagement if you're trying to deliver your content in the way that your audience wants to digest it. And that's
And I think that probably the way I would describe it is looking for patterns of signals rather than signals. And it's very easy to just latch onto the signal and then say like, hey, this, and I get called out. Classic thing. We're in a sales meeting earlier, like just reviewing active clients and what's in the pipeline, which I even feel dirty saying that stuff because I used to always just dread saying these things. And I'm like, they're not called prospects. They're called humans. They're called potential clients. I don't say the word prospect. I had a guy you actually walked out to a booth. It's like a bunch of nerds. And like, we're card carrying nerds. We are introverts by nature. We only come out when it's dark or when there's free food. And so here is this guy, and he says, yeah, I was just talking to another prospect earlier who had the same problem you have. And I was like, dude, you just, like that guy, he glazed over the moment he heard the word prospect. And I was like, and I told this fellow who was there on the sales rep side, and I said, just a tip, what I find is don't say prospect because immediately you labeled them and then they feel transactional. I said, but say we were talking to somebody else from our customer community or from the tech community or from the community. And immediately it's just like, okay, there's someone who's similar to me.
Yeah.
And then they feel familiar, not put in a box and labeled. Yeah. And it was really tricky to kind of do that stuff. But anyway, so here I am like going through this thing, talking about this potential client that's coming. And my signals were like, yep, all good, all good. And then I get an email literally right before the meeting saying, we actually don't have any short-term need for what you're doing, but hey, let's keep in touch throughout the year.
Yeah.
Which is fine. But then it told me, I'm like, oh, how could I have had this in like high likely conversion and it went to this? So then I realized, oh, I was looking at signals, not patterns of signals.
Right.
When I look at the pattern, it was like the conversations were breaking further apart. There was more meetings being skipped. And it was like, oh, okay. Even though it was like totally interested, can't make today's meeting, but let's hop on next week.
Yeah.
I should have heard, all I hear as the hopeful salesperson is totally interested.
Yeah.
Didn't hear the, hey, but let's deprioritize because my time is worth more elsewhere than with you. That's effectively what was being said in the kindest way.
Right. But
it's like, oh,
yeah.
Okay, hard lesson.
Yeah, definitely a hard lesson. There is, and you said the word earlier, there is a cadence to business, and I think that is crucial to understand. My flow of business cycle is the school year, and to think anything else is, in my opinion, just silly. Okay, you need to look at the fact that you need to get all of your messaging working as if parents are looking at a calendar of the school year because that's what they're doing at home. We didn't call our, yeah, we called our, mostly called our clients families. That gave them a more humanistic, um,
It's like how Starbucks has partners,
right.
right? That
Yeah,
instead of employees, it's like
yeah.
that. That's actually, it seems tiny, but it actually does matter.
It totally matters, and it changes how you're going to talk to someone. People also want to do business with people, right? And a lot of people don't realize that, especially with their website. They make their website look corporate, and the language is very corporate. And if and I think that not a lot of people do kind of differentiate. They do what everybody else is doing, in a lot of different industries. And your website should be what it's like to experience your service or what your product is about. Now, granted, Amazon's a little bit different, but you feel Amazon culture when you work with Amazon. And they do things in the best possible way. Love or hate Amazon, they are a case study. Just looking at any interaction, you have a problem, you are treated kindly and with respect. And and I always tried to do that. I would go a little too far sometimes. Rachel always like, you are going too far for this customer. But I think that it is important to look at, to look at we're all working together, and I'm here to serve you, and that never bothered me. And that's why I've never really liked calling myself like a CEO or anything. I'm just a business owner who's trying to make everyone a musician. And that's just, I simplify as much as I can what it is. There's a recent, I just recently heard this, and I've done marketing forever, which is the job to be done kind of philosophy. And that's really how you really want. What is the job of music lessons? It's to enhance people's lives. It's to fulfill aspirations. It's to, make someone have more confidence. It allows you to be creative. It gives you all of these things, and and you need to look at, that's the job that needs to be done. It's to those are the things, and so that's the driving force of how I did everything. And I never knew that it was actually a thing. It's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
McDonald's.
Well, look at the classic book, right? Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. What's the publishing date on? Like 1927 or something? Like this is not, this is like the same as the behavioral, heuristics that we look at around, how to do marketing and engagement. It's behavioral psychology fundamentals that we've now dubbed behavioral economics, and we've learned about some of this stuff, but these are things that we've known about for centuries, if not at least decades, and we've just simply honed it down where now we can sort of map it out.
Yeah, but I think that people do still miss the humanity of things. They don't. I know a lot of businesses who won't have pictures of themselves on the internet, but that their story is important to be telling. And someone wants to be like, oh, like, if you met someone at a party and it's like, oh, I'd love to do business with them. I like who they are. But if someone goes to a party and just says, I make all sorts of Italian food. I make pasta, I make meatballs, I make, like, and they just go through everything. No one's going to want to work with them because all they're talking about is, it's our personalities that need to come out in our copywriting and our photos. And a lot of small businesses don't want to take that risk. They don't want to add the humanity. I find that the behavioral economics makes it more clinical, and it puts a divide between your customer, which I think needs to be thrown out. And
Yeah, and it's very true, and that's why I loved, if you read like Thinking Fast and Slow, and I'd studied Kahneman and Tversky for a long time, and it was interesting to see that some of the heuristics, my favorite of all the heuristics is stuff that breaks the math.
Yeah.
Where you realize that there are behaviors that will occur. The hard part that I always find is that I love this stuff so much. And I'll tell, like I said, I laugh, my partner, I told her, I'm like, hey, when I first met her, like we just hang out the first time and she's like, oh, what do you do? I'm like, well, I do this, I work in tech, but my the reason why I do it well is because I've studied behavior psychology. I said, so my background is understanding humanism and behavior, and then engagement, and then mastering engagement and being able to read people particularly well. And of course, the first thing that happens, she's like, are you like psychoanalyzing me now? Like, well, I will be in a moment because you've kind of coaxed me into doing it. But I'm like, no, that's not what, that's like the person that says, yeah, I love Italian food. We make pasta, we make meatballs. Like, it's really tough to sort of like dump out your talents, but not start with, hey, so what do you folks do, right? What kind of food do you like?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, I like Italian. Awesome. Where have you eaten?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, and then eventually they go, huh, so what, oh, curious why you're asking, what's your background? Oh, I actually have an Italian restaurant, and okay, yeah, what kind of food do you do? Oh, we do pasta, we do meatballs. Like, okay, now there's a context to you giving this tactical layout of how you can deliver an experience for them.
Yeah.
But just by coming in going like, we don't do it when we meet somebody for the first time, like, hey, really like you, great kisser, gonna go out for dinner, we can go to movies, love these kind of movies, long wish. Like, it's like, no, you don't just like trauma dump the things you can do and have done with other people. You'd be like, what would you like to do? What makes you excited about going out? Like, let's make a great fun night together.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. How do we do that? Oh, exactly. Awesome.
Yeah. Like, it's amazing how many restaurants on their social feed will not have a picture of their actual dining room.
Yeah.
That's why I would want to go to a restaurant. I can just looking at food. It's like, yeah, you have to be good at the food. I'm paying not for food. I'm paying for the experience of being in your restaurant. What's that like? And whether it's I'm in a hurry, right? Like, nobody talks about the speed at which they move their food. Some are slow on purpose because it's a very elegant, long experience, and that's what somebody wants. Or maybe somebody just needs quick, healthy food. That's great. We have a Thai place that we love here in Hamilton. We go there because it's consistent and they're fun. They make little jokes on their blackboard. Like, it's very personable experience. But they're there to serve you to get in and out because it's high turnover because that's their business. And I find, a lot of people don't want to talk about that type of thing or think that that's important. They don't think, they think that everybody just wants to see the food. I think you need to break it up, food and story. It's like, here's a couple and this guy proposed to her. That's an amazing story. Why did they choose this restaurant? Or feeling honored that they chose your restaurant because you're the business owner.
Yeah, and would the photo to go with your story be a picture of a ring or a picture of food, or would it be a picture of a guy on his knee beside a table?
Right.
Like, the experience has to come through in the way you describe it, both visually and textually.
Yeah.
And that's why customer stories are so important, because not that you're saying this customer says we're amazing. What you're saying is this is the partnership we went into and generated an outcome for our client who is so happy with it, they're willing to share their story with our clients.
Yeah, exactly.
And just that context change is so, but I see this all the time. Sales folks will be like, hey, they'll see some person like at a company event or like just like a group event, like, tell them how like we were the only way you could do something. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you just immediately evacuated people's caring from that room. Mm-hmm. Because now you are talking about yourself and your company and your product, and you're asking someone else to support you. It's like, this is why the trusted advisor thing is such a broken myth, that you can't have a trusted advisor if that person is paid by the person you're supposed to be trusted by.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I used to go to parties and people would say, what do you do? And I would say, I make musicians. And it was a great way to break things because it wasn't about me. It was about the people I served. And it always brought out a story from the person, which whether it was, oh my God, I did piano lessons and I was terrible at it, or I did piano lessons and I got to grade 8 and I should have gone further. And it would just be an icebreaker but it was a way to talk about myself without talking about myself. And it was conscious because I wanted those stories. As you said, like I'm an introvert too. I don't really want to talk to myself. I'd rather be with people who talk um, than 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 do all the talking. And it was a great way to kind of pitch it back in a non, you know, unprofessional or salesy rather kind of way, which I can be. I can be very salesy as well. Um, but my sales comes from, again, serving, not from money.
Yeah, it's connection. It is really like, how do you
Yeah,
create a connection, create engagement,
yeah,
talk about outcomes,
yeah.
like just the fact that you say, like, I create musicians. My thing I like to, when people ask me, like, I'll try to figure out how to describe it. I say, I give emotion to technical content.
Mm,
And it's like, it's such a weird thing because from there, then people go like, well, how do you do that?
yeah.
Oh, okay. Now I can expound upon it versus, I do technical writing for, as an agency for various clients. We white label our content, but we do it in a way that's high engagement. We're like, we make pasta, we make meatballs, we make, like, no, don't go through the menu. Don't go through the ingredients lists. Show them a picture of the bloody food and people enjoying it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Or the chef making it. And
Right.
that's one thing. It's just like, I don't understand why I don't see a lot of restaurants doing that. It's just like little tips. Like you could just do a little thing of just like, I throw a little bit of salt on my cake because it pops the flavor. Something that you do differently that you could share. It's like, oh, that's different. Now you're talking about, what am I going to experience from you cooking? And it changes the common way of looking at marketing in general, which in my opinion is about serving and not about taking. And that's how I mean, in order to know how to serve, you have to know who you're serving. As everyone says, you have to know your client, and not everyone is going to be your client. I'm not creating prodigies at my school. It's just not something that I want to do. It's something that I find when prodigies get older, they start to feel a little empty from the ones that I've spoken to because they can just play anything, but they don't really. You say, let's just jam in a 1-4-5 chord progression. They're like, oh, how do you do that? You know what I mean? It's a different skill set that I don't, for me, just didn't want to create. I wanted to create music for love of the instrument and learning. I say instrument because I'm at a piano right here. So
Yeah. Well, and I guess that I'll say the message from there is, it's not just about marketing, it's about anti-marketing. Like, you have to identify and allow people to self-identify quickly when they get to your website, to your story, to your party, to whatever. They should immediately be able to qualify themselves in or qualify themselves out. And you should make it as obvious as possible who you don't serve
yeah,
by describing who you do serve and what outcomes they're after. Because like you said, if you are going after this thing and then you describe your school or a business that you're helping, and they say, this is great. Like, my sister does creative stuff. She makes these little stuffed animals. She calls them critters. They're her critters.
mm-hmm.
So she makes these critters. And she's like, well, how do I sell them? I said, well, go to a coffee place that has a bunch of really cool, like kitschy stuff from local artists.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a likely cohort of the type of people who will love a handmade item. But you won't go to Zeller's, good guy, like, or the Bay or any of these. They're all dead companies, but some, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, boy, oh boy, we've outlived a lot of brands, haven't we?
in Canada.
Yeah. So, but she immediately, like, rather than you advertising to a bunch of people that are not your target market, the same as hyperlocal marketing is like, let's go to your core market, get them to self-qualify and self-identify,
Yeah.
and then learn from them by listening and serving.
Yeah, no, totally agreed. I mean, there's that story also, like, what solution are you providing, right? There's when you when you go to the hardware store, you're not buying a hammer, you're buying the nail, and then you're buying the hole that the nail creates, and then that's creating the picture. And Seth Godin goes through the whole thing all the way to now I have a shelf which hangs all of my trophies that I can show people. Well, if you take that story, like when I took that story to my client, it was, what is it that my client is really trying to do? Well, yeah, they want music lessons, but really it's that on an unconscious level, they want to be considered a good parent, meaning they are giving their child the experience. And I know about my customers, their kids are in lots of activities. They want to give their kids the best. So the driving force is a certain amount of guilt in terms of, can I give them everything in this world? I want them to be prepared for the world, and music is a part of that. And I mean, I don't use that in a manipulative way, which you could, but I use it in a guiding force of empathy in terms of, how hard our our terms of service is just basically, this is what we're responsible for, and this is what you're responsible for, and this is how we're going to do business together. And
yeah, it's more like a shared accountability model versus a terms of service.
Exactly, because I was tired of those terms of services that were so technical, and I knew that my customer, my ideal client, did not want to have the time to read that crap, unless they were a lawyer or someone who enjoyed that. But I just wanted to be like, let's just be totally transparent, and like, we're going to make sure that we have a clean room, we have a teacher every week, we're going to provide this service, and you're going to show up. You're going to pay for the lessons that you don't show up for, regardless. And and then I gave them what their responsibility was, and it does make it a partnership and teamwork. And I've done that from almost the beginning, because I didn't want that whole technical things. Now, certain things you have to have on your website now, and this is where marketing's changed too. It's like, I recently am doing texting marketing, and I have to have, because of the company that I'm using, I have to have this on this very technical terms of service on my page. But that's, again, another relationship with one of my suppliers that I need to adhere to. So, it's all about the balance of making everything work together.
But in the end, I think really the story that people should come away with is that you need to continue to be a student of this as much as you're a teacher. Even when we think that we've got it right, I'm going to learn something in an hour that I won't have known about marketing or engagement. And it's funny. The only difference is between, they say like, why hire an expert? It's like simple, because we've done this a lot. And so we've learned efficiencies that allow you to get there faster.
Right.
And that's effectively the services mindset of like, you could do this. Oh boy, you could do. Every house that I've lived in, I decided to save money by doing my own baseboards because I knew how to do them. And every single house that I lived in, do you know what I did 1 week before I sold the house? I put in baseboards. Right. Those baseboards sat in the basement, never painted, never cut, never touched. No baseboards in the house until I sold the house. The only time that house looked great was when I sold it, because then I was creating an experience for the next consumer. And it was wild, because that's what it was. Like, I was not thinking, to me, it didn't matter as much on the day to day. But now I go and I say, before I do something, I say, like, what's the thing that I can do that I know that I can complete? And where do I need help?
Yeah.
And then as I get to those stuck points, then I know, how do I mitigate this? Well, I've got an agency I can call. I've got a friend I can call. Or sometimes you just got to knuckle down and go for it. And there's sometimes, like with writing, like, you can't make it faster. You can't make music come out faster. Sure, you hear these heroic tales of, they were sitting in their bathroom and the brand new acoustic, and they decided to write a song which was recorded on a phone that became the #1 hit.
Yeah.
True statement. But if you said, you know what I'm going to do? I just ordered my new acoustic, really cool phone on the way, bathroom sounds great, I totally know what I'm going to do. Like, no. That can happen by accident, right. Happy accidents, as Bob Ross would say.
Yeah.
But what you need to do is you need to do stuff that you know you can do with purpose and intent, and then where you cannot affect that or you can get bogged down by it. Look for somebody else that is their purpose and that is their intent.
Yeah. I mean, again, back to music, because that's funny. Um, I play scales because I enjoy them. Okay. I don't play scales just to get better at scales. I enjoy the feel under my fingers. I enjoy figuring out what the purpose of that scale is in relationship to something else. I'm always playing scale. I played the G major scale uh, hundreds of thousands of times. It's the same with marketing. I am always wanting to learn something new, something that's cool. Sometimes I might use the tool or the technique or the skill, and sometimes I might not, but I enjoy going down the path. And, I thought of a post of doing on LinkedIn is like, um, how would I do things differently starting where we started back then? It's like, there's no answer. Things were different. Things are way different now. I would do things way differently. I wouldn't do them the same way, but I also wouldn't go back and change anything because that also taught me what I need to know now. And so practice. And I've like most of the books that I've read aren't even business books. I would say the top books that I love are Icarus Deception by Seth Godin, which is not even really that business oriented. Rework by Jason Fried, and
David Hannemeyer Hansen. Yeah. DHH is the easier way.
and Power of Vulnerability by Brene Brown. Those are my top three books, and they just taught me more about how instead of what, and it just allows me to practice. I just think about practicing as if I do a musical instrument. So, AdWords is not the same 5 years ago as it is now. It's totally different. What kind of ad copywriting you're going to do. SEO, totally different now than it was in 2010. You got to keep up to date with those things. You can either follow people or learn it on your own, but it is constantly practicing. And that's why I like paralleling it with music, is because I enjoy the practice and going through the motions as much as the end result, whether it be a song, a solo, or some contribution. And I think that's really, you're 100% right. You can't stop. That's what I love about it. I will never know.
Right.
Right. And I'm
That's
also
it.
going to learn.
The idea that like people always say, it's like do a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Like true, because you'll probably never sell what you're doing. But it's more like if you can find joy in what you do because you've got it passion. The worst thing to tell somebody is turn your passion into a job. Like that's pretty fundamentally backwards.
Oh, yeah.
Find a job where your passion is applicable is really the way I would describe it, or find an opportunity where your passion can come through.
Yeah.
The fact that I became good at marketing wasn't because I went to school for marketing. I was a landscaper, a shoe repair brand. I played guitar, in bands, and I did a bunch of weird things. So for me to arrive at technical marketing and public speaking, there's no path that gets me there. None of it. But it just was a confluence of events and persistence in doing so that then mapping backwards and looking back over time, that's the big difference, is that can I go back and learn from what I've done more than just to repeat, or just to sort of muddle through. Mm-hmm. And it's tough. Again, as a new founder for, folks that are looking to you for marketing help, they shouldn't be concentrating on marketing. They should be concentrating on executing the best business and customer experience they can, and then trust an expert, a trusted advisor, one might say, and, be able to leverage the best of that capability and make it part of their overall portfolio.
Oh, yeah. Like the expert is also going to be able to, and this is something that a lot of people have a hard time with, but they can see things that you can't see. And it's just from an outside perspective. It's like kind of self-help books, right? They get you so far, but you really need a therapist to actually work through stuff that you're struggling with. Somebody is an expert with an outside opinion and seeing how things could be different or better, or how and those are things that I look at when I'm with a client. I'm like, it's not just marketing. It's just like, have you looked at your analytics? Like, do you even know what is happening right now? Because that will tell you how to take the next path. And it's amazing how many people, they don't like it and it's boring. But when you show them the value of Google Analytics, like, I helped a chiropractor and she was getting a lot of hits from Virginia. And we're like, why is this? And we found out that it was an Amazon call center constantly going to her website and taking up a order of her analytics. So we muted that in it. And now she had a more realistic way of understanding where people were coming from. Like, just simple things like that. These don't have to be complicated things, but it's just taking your analytics and using that to generate creative ideas of how you're going to move forward.
Yeah, and using, I'll say, tricks, but not to be tricky.
Right.
And it's so funny, like I said, I always say this, I'm constantly juggling cards in my hand and messing around with them. But I'm the worst magician ever, because the first thing I do when I show somebody a trick is I show them exactly how I do the trick. Like, but that's the fun of it. It's like, you can do this thing where you're like, oh my God, like, how do you do this? You're like, oh, I can hide the card. You're like, like, that's kind of the fun for me. Is like, it's a trick, but I'm not going to make it a trick. I'm not trying to trick you. I'm going to show you how this trick works. Yeah. And SEO hijacks and all these things that are out there, if you don't approach it with the idea of making it a valuable thing to create a conversion and ultimately drive pipeline in business, if you're just using it for trickery, what you're going to get is trickery in the results. Yeah. And I did it. You have to do those things sometimes, though. So in year one for my company's website, I put up an events page, and it was just a plug-in. And I found all, like, hundreds of tech events that are going on around the world. And I created an event page for each one on my website. Totally automated. Yeah. Just go in. I got somebody to help me do, I got a VA that was helping me do stuff. I'm like, here, find these 100 events, fill in all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, I'm like outranking these people that are hosting events because I'm getting all of this inbound.
Right.
So if I look at, like, oh, great, I'm getting, 500, 600, 700 views a month where I should be getting 4. This is great. Mm-hmm. But wait, none of them are converting, right? Okay, so is it actually a good metric to chase? So what I did was that allowed me to do things and then change the way the event pages are. And then I don't do that anymore. I actually, just because it's now interfering with my actual conversions, because people will get there and they aren't good cohorts for me. So I don't need to do that anymore. Yeah. So I've changed because I've got enough organic inbounds now that it's not necessary. But doing that first layer was necessary, and it's a great starter, but it's like kindling for the fire.
Right. Yeah. No, that's really interesting that you've discovered that, because that's the first thing is that, I'm getting lots of hits. I see this with ads. People do this with ads all the time. They make the big mistake of, they'll put up an ad and then they'll send them to their homepage. It's like, what are you doing?
I have no way to identify what just happened.
You've just confused the heck out of your customer. It's like they're looking for back pain relief, and you send them to your homepage where you offer chiropractic services and reflexology and all these other things. It's like, now you've just lost them. So if you have 500 people who are confused, that's not good numbers to know why they've been there. And it's interesting how it's back to the vanity metrics. People, you could 40,000 people in your who follow you aren't buying anything. There's something wrong with who you're attracting. Right. And
I used to always joke, and I would say, like, when people say, like, oh, I have, like, I've got 5,000 friends on Facebook. I'm like, you think so? Ask each of them for $5 and you'll find out how many friends you really got. But that's almost how I would treat it. Treat your metrics that way. And this is actually a good entrepreneurial thing. My co-founder, Irfan, taught me this. He's like, everyone loves what you do. Everyone loves your idea. Everyone loves the outcomes they can get. They'll tell you all about how great your platform is until you ask them for money. Right. At that point, they actually have to commit that they're not just talking you up, but they actually have to commit a financial transaction. And it's like, oh, okay. And it is funny that he learned that early on with his previous company,
Mhm.
where they were doing lots of testing with practitioners. And all these practitioners were like, we love this. This is what I would like to see. This is what we like. But what ended up happening was they created a bunch of, it was like the Homer. It was a car that was for one person that wanted 17 weird things.
Mhm.
But then when they would go to all of these people who were in their preview group, they'd be like, okay, awesome. So it's going to be like, $4,000 a month for the service or whatever it was going to be. And they're like, oh, now we're good, but I appreciate you letting me help you build this. It was very helpful. Can I just stay in the community edition then?
Yeah.
And you're like, the whole idea was we were supposed to get them in the community edition and find out how to trigger them to pay.
Yeah.
Not how to load up my paid features and then move all these features down in the community edition.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to try and get people on board. So yeah, it's a set of lessons for sure. But so what's your looking ahead? You've got 2024. We're hopefully pandemic free. It's an election year in a lot of places. There's a lot of weirdness going on. What's the next few months look like for you and AWH Marketing?
So I'm doing a lot of presentations. I'm reaching out to a lot of BIAs and doing a lot of talks. I do one specific talk on five ways of strengthening your digital assets, and what to look at. Because I find a lot of people overlook some very simple basic concepts like white space. Like, they want to flood their website with as much information as possible, whether it's the menu navigation have 17 different options, or they just want to have, like, here, get this free ebook, and then over here this free something else. And so I go through this presentation and I talk about the five things that I think are important, which is the website is number one, and second is your Google business profile. It's amazing how many people don't have that, especially with the brick and mortar. It's like, considering Google owns 60% of the traffic out there,
That's right.
you need to be on a Google business profile. Email marketing, which I think is still crazy and underutilized, and gives you complete control over how you message your clients. And again, I think that's totally underutilized. Analytics is the fourth thing, which we mentioned before. And then to a lesser degree, it's social media. I think social media is important when done properly. And I don't think that it should be to try and get as many followers. Most people who have higher followings find that engagement is much more challenging when you start to get over 10,000 people. And if you're not engaging with social media, then there's really no point in the social media. You're just out there for vanity metrics, which is fine too. If that's what you want and you enjoy it, go for it. But if you're looking for it as a tool to help either convert or to create a community, I think that's more important than, like, having a Facebook group is better than having an Instagram page that has people who will never buy your service.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's talk about irony that people say, like, I want to get a good amount of stuff from TikTok or Instagram. Like, do you understand how difficult it is to convert anybody on that? Even if they want to, it's a gosh darn maze to get to where you are.
Yeah.
Like, link in bio, my arse. How is it that we're this far into the evolution of Instagram and we're still at link in bio? Like, there should be way more ways to interact with that system. It's really weird.
It's because what the big thing that I've noticed, the enormous thing that I've noticed with social media in general, is if you post anything in your first post that takes you off the page, you will be deranked. So you will not get the leverage that you need. And so it's often told, you tell people what you need to do is put that link in the first comment, and it subverts the algorithm to de-rank you. And it's too bad, because and it's ironic, because that's what they kind of espouse, is just freedom of speech and being able to, it's social interaction, but they don't want you to go to someone else's party, right? Instagram doesn't want you to go to TikTok. TikTok does not want you to go over to LinkedIn. LinkedIn doesn't want, and they'll do it with their algorithm. To a
I
certain
saw a great, someone the other day said, like, I'm an adult. I don't watch TikTok. I wait until they come to Instagram on Reels 2 weeks later. Like that's, so there's a funny, cohort representation of like who your personas are.
Yeah.
But as you said, that is really why. Why is Instagram probably not an effective marketing and conversion channel is because the people that are likely to use that use it for a very specific and distinct purpose. And it's not to find a brand that I want to click a link for.
Yeah.
My girl and I do this all the time. We'll like find some restaurant, and it's like the first thing you do is like, where is this place? Like you have to bust open the comments and hope that somebody else like said, this is the best meal ever. And you're like, where is it? Where's the meal? 10 comments down, and all you see is people saying, where?
Yeah. No, it's, I mean, yeah, social media is just a beast that's just totally different. And evolved in a very weird way. But the biggest danger that I have, like I think it should be one of your pillars for sure in terms of your marketing channels. But the biggest concern that I have is just how little control you have over your content. And I remember I went and saw Dan Mangan, who's an amazing Canadian musician, and he got up on stage and he's like, here, just follow my email list. And he's like, listen, as a musician, like we check all our analytics, and one post will be released to 3 people, and the next day it'll be 30,000 people, and you have no control of when that is going to happen. All the, Metricool and Hootsuite and all of those, and later they'll all tell you when the best possible time is, but it's still not truly learning how to optimize it. And at the very worst end, I've seen many businesses lose their accounts, not being told why they've lost their account. And I've seen restaurants who got all their sales from their Instagram, and then their Instagram's gone for whatever reason, and now they've lost 100% income. And that is a horrible statistic to have. You don't want that in your analytics for sure. So you have to use it in an effective way that's in conjunction with everything else. And I think you truly have to, like, always follow Jay Abraham as, in my opinion, one of the smartest men out there, smartest people out there. And he's just like, you need to lead your customer. And so that's what everything that you do should be doing, is to lead them for what's best for them. And being an advisor in a best possible way, the same way that I will tell a customer not to come to my school because they're too far away in Toronto, and I know that it's not gonna work out for them. So you need to use that, and so you use social media as a tool to entertain, to do all those things, to have the followers. But if your follower is in China and your service can't get to them, that's not really a customer that you want.
We're big in Belgium. Was it from the movie Singles? We're sitting in the middle of a diner in Seattle, like, but we're really huge in Belgium.
Yeah.
Every once in a while I get that. I get a podcast ranking notification and be like, oh, you hit number 1 in Lithuania. I'm like, there's like 4 podcasts in Lithuania. It's not hard to be number 1. I'll get deranked 3 days later. I'm like, oh. Yeah. It was a good run. Yeah. Yeah. Lithuania, I'll be back.
How did I lose that market?
So, well, this is awesome, Alex. If for folks that do want to reach you, what's the best way they can do that? And we'll make sure we put show notes and ways for them to get connected with you as well.
Yeah, the best way is probably you can contact me on LinkedIn. It's just Alex_Hobcraft at the end of the as the slug in LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, but not so much anymore. I kind of lost my drive on that one since Elon Musk and all the craziness that happened there. But you can go to my website, alexhobcraft.com, and those are probably the best ways. Email me at ahobcraft@gmail.com.
Well, the good thing is you have a very not seemingly unique and yet somehow very unique name.
I know.
It is the like I watched a documentary the other day about me. It's called The Life of Easy E, which is like why I have to be DiscoPosse, because I'll never be Eric Wright anywhere in the world. Because you Google Eric Wright and all you're going to get is Easy E with 2 9s across his chest. Like, it's just I cannot win on SEO for my own bloody name. So. So I ended up going with DiscoPosse.
Yeah, no, I remember. Yeah, you've been DiscoPosse since I've known you, for sure.
Yeah, it became a weird thing, but it's, so luckily you've got more than just a distinct name, but a distinct capability that's very valuable and very unique. And I'm humbled that, I've been lucky enough to learn from you over the years, and your friendship and mentorship has been incredibly valuable. It's something that's really, really cool. So
it goes both ways. Your creativity and how you're always trying stuff. I've learned a lot about that, and just throw past at the wall and see what sticks. I love that way that's the best way is to test. And you've always done that too. So I appreciate the kind words. Thank you. And right back at you. Yeah.
There you go. Coming soon to a podcast again near you, I'm sure. So we'll have lots of more stuff to talk about. So folks, go do check it out. Alex Hobcraft will have all of the links down below. Or if you're just listening and not watching, hey, and if you want music lessons and you're based in Lithuania, Alex is great. So he'll happily hyperlocal market some in-person lessons to you. It's $8,000 a lesson because it comes with plane tickets.
Facebook price of $8,000.
Exactly.
US Canada.
Right on. Well, thank you for letting me test this. I can officially say the first StreamYard version of the podcast I did as well, which is kind of cool. So
nice.
A lot has changed over the time. So this has been awesome. So thank you very much.
Yeah, cool. Awesome.
All right, I'm going to end my recording here.